a.m. Eastern Time. That's when Adam Schefter tweeted out the words that Jet fans like me have been waiting to hear for what feels like our entire lives. Le'Veon Bell, 4 years, $52.5 million, max value of $61 million with incentives. He's guaranteed 35. Schefter joined us live just a while ago here on Get Up.
Well, Greeny, Le'Veon Bell's agent spent the better part of yesterday trying to drum up interest across the league. And Le'Veon Bell really was talking to the Jets. There were some other teams like the 49ers or Raiders monitoring the situation, waiting to see whether anything could happen. And then shortly after midnight, Le'Veon Bell made the decision to go to the New York Jets, who earlier in the day had lost Anthony Barr, who had some extra money to find. And then, of course, when you have a rookie quarterback and you want to surround him with as many weapons as possible, it's a great advantage that Sam Darnold is playing on a rookie contract because, as is the case in Cleveland with Baker Mayfield, the Browns can afford to pay two high-priced wide receivers in Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry. The Jets could go out and spend big money on a running back. They did that with Le'Veon Bell. That deal gets done early this morning.
And shortly thereafter, Le'Veon Bell tweeting, "I'm back in the green, baby. Let's get it." My sentiments exactly. Let us welcome in Jets quarterback Josh McCown, who's become a good friend of our show here on Get Up. Josh, we're delighted to get some reaction from you this morning. What was your first thought when you heard the Jets signed Le'Veon Bell?
Well, just like everybody else, I'm excited. If you're a Jets fan and part of the organization, you're excited to add a player of that magnitude, and so I'm thrilled for what it means for our team, what it means for Sam, and you know, Coach Gase, an offensive guy coming in here that knows how to use a running back. So it's great for all parties.
Can you be specific with that? Because you have been working closely with Sam Darnold, and Dan Orlovsky just did a terrific video breakdown. But in your own words, how would you describe what a player with the talents of Le'Veon Bell can mean to the development of a young quarterback like Sam Darnold?
Well, here's what he means. You know, we talked about it after the season. When Sam came in after the injury and played, he was processing a lot faster, getting the ball down to the running backs on first and second down and base downs, not forcing the ball. This will add to that because it's one thing to tell a young guy, hey, you got to process quicker, you got to get it to the backs. But when you don't have the right guy or when you don't have a playmaker underneath, that affects you sometimes. Or when you want to make the big play. When you got a guy like Le'Veon Bell who can you can check the ball down to him, you can go out and make big plays. It just gives you comfort as a young quarterback to process quicker and to get value out of the passing game in that regard. So I'm excited for Sam and his growth with the addition of Le'Veon.
And Le'Veon Bell's obviously a huge name, huge personality, and we've seen the things that have gone on in his past. How would you describe the Jets locker room and how you expect that to mix? Well,
I think it'll be great. You know, there's an opportunity here. You know, when you add a great player like that, the things are trending forward. You know, you got a new head coach. You add a player like Le'Veon offensively. It's only going to be good for us moving forward for those guys, and I think he'll step right in. Guys understand. You know, he stood on principle. He took a year off on principle, what he believed his value was, and that takes a lot. And so I think guys respect that, and we understand it's a business. It's a good move for him, I think, to move on from Pittsburgh and to land in a new spot, and so we're excited to have him.
Josh, thanks a million for doing this. We appreciate it. We'll see you as soon as you can get back in here, hopefully sometime soon. Thanks a million. Let's go to the table here with the Dans. Again, Orlovsky and Graziano tell you what happened and tell you what it means. Let me go to you first, Dan, because I think the perception around the league is, if you look at the numbers that Le'Veon Bell winds up getting, clearly the offers he was expecting or at least hoping for were not out there for him. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, everything we understand is that Pittsburgh was offering more a year ago, 2 years ago, than he ended up taking. But we'll wait to see the real numbers, right? The hard numbers on the contract. The guarantee was a big part of the issue with Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. The Steelers only guarantee signing bonus. That's the way they do their contracts. So if this Jets contract guarantees him, you know, this year's salary, next year's salary, et cetera, you can understand why it would be a better deal than what he thought was on the table from Pittsburgh. And is there any concern about a guy who maybe didn't get everything that he wanted? He dropped a rap album overnight, which is good for him. He's got other things going on. But is there any concern of any kind that you would have about all of those sort of peripheral things?
There would be a little trepidation because his value is never going to be higher. I mean, he's coming off a 1,300-yard, 85-catch season in 2017. So he's never going to be better than that. I mean, you can't imagine it. And so if his performance was as high as it was ever going to be, and he didn't get the money that he necessarily wanted. If I'm Le'Veon Bell, I'm like, what else do I have to do? Now, that being said, athletes use a lot of different things for motivation, and so he can use this as something to go, I'm going to make sure that everyone's proved wrong, that I'm the best player in the NFL, and go out and prove it week after week after week, because he still is relatively young and maybe can hit again. But I don't have a ton of concern about it. I believe that Le'Veon Bell is a hard-working guy that is committed to his craft and wants to be one of the greats. He talked about his admiration for Curtis Martin, and that was one of the reasons why he chose the Jets. So it's not a huge concern of mine.
Look, I'll say it again. He averages more yards rushing per game than Emmitt Smith. He averages more catches per game than Terrell Owens. He is both a Hall of Fame running back and a Hall of Fame receiver all in one. He is a weapon. They don't get paid that way, obviously. What reaction are you hearing around the sport to this deal?
Well, again, Le'Veon Bell, I think people thought the market was not going to be what he wanted it to be. And I think, you know, you get the I told you so's now, right? I mean, this is still a pretty sweet deal, right? It's a tick better than David Johnson on average annual value. And he's the second highest paid running back behind Todd Gurley. The thought was that teams were going to say to Le'Veon Bell and his agent, no, the Gurley deal's an outlier. The Rams went too far. We can't negotiate off of that. Let's negotiate off of David Johnson instead. That appears to be what happened. And again, as we heard Adam earlier, it didn't seem like there were a ton of teams willing to compete financially with the Jets. And of course, that kept the price from being his dream price as well.
Let's remind everybody how good this dude is, though. I mean, there's not many backs that create their own holes like Le'Veon Bell. There's not a lot of backs in the NFL that make something out of nothing like Le'Veon Bell. There's not a lot of backs that you can take him and put him out at wide receiver and not feel bad if it's cornerback out there or a good cover safety because you have enough trust that he'll win in man-to-man coverage. There's not a lot of backs as good in the screen game. And honestly, there's not a lot of backs as good as blitz protection. He is a complete all-around football player that the Jets, in many ways, stole for the value that they got him. And he is a fantastic football player, and he's going to help a young quarterback immensely.
That's the key thing for people to remember. March is not necessarily all about how good the player is. It's how interested and how many teams are interested. You know, C.J. Mosley's getting $17 million a year. Trey Flowers getting $18 million a year. Are those guys good enough to justify those salaries? No, but a lot of teams were bidding. Obviously not the same with Le'Veon Bell. Although, again, we should all be so unfortunate in terms of what he ended up getting,
now,
right?
So that's the deal you're waking up to this morning. How about the one you went to sleep to last night? Odell Beckham Jr. traded to Cleveland. The Giants sending him to the Browns. He played in 12 games last year after coming back from a broken ankle, caught 77 passes for over 1,000 yards. The numbers say he's the most productive receiver through his tenure to this point in the history of the National Football League. What's the deal? If you haven't seen it, let me show it to you. The Giants will receive the Browns' first-round pick this year. That's number 17 overall. Their second, third-round pick this year, which is 95 overall, and safety Jabril Peppers. Now, we will remind you, the Giants general manager, Dave Gettleman, has not been talking a whole lot about making this deal. In fact, they've been busy doing a lot of other things. They last year took Saquon Barkley, number 2 overall, at a time when a lot of people wondered if they would wind up taking a quarterback in that spot. They decided not to do it. Instead, they signed Odell Beckham last year to a 5-year, $95 million extension. It came right before the start of the regular season. Remember, he had been injured the year before. There'd been all those questions. Now they've decided not to bring back Landon Collins, the safety who signs a monster deal in Washington. And so they're letting some people go. They're letting talent go. They're letting money walk out the door. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense, perhaps, to have Odell Beckham Jr. on their squad. And so they make the trade yesterday, sending him to the Cleveland Browns. I will remind you, their general manager, Dave Gettleman, at the Combine, so we're talking like 2 weeks ago, said this.
I'll say this. It's a repeat of what I said at my postseason presser. We didn't sign Odell to trade him, okay? So I know that's all over the place. So understand that, and that's all I need to say about that.
Okay, so he said that, and then 2 weeks later seems to have changed his mind or whatever. I'm not in the business of calling people out for saying things that are untrue at this time. If you're in the NFL, because everyone is doing it for their own reasons. So let's find out what is true. Dan Graziano, how did this happen?
Yeah, this is all based on conversations I've had in the last, half a day with people involved with the teams, people close to the situation. The Giants were not out there trying to trade Odell Beckham. We're not soliciting offers. They were getting interest. Teams were calling them. And as one person I talked to this morning said, when teams are calling, it's always important to listen, especially when you find yourself, as they do, in rebuild mode. The Browns were aggressive. The Browns called the Steelers to see if they could get Antonio Brown. The Steelers said, no, we're not going to trade him in the division. Browns didn't love the free agent crop of wide receivers, wanted to do it by trade. Beckham, the biggest prize. So they kept after the Giants. Around the time of the Combine, the Giants made the decision and ownership got on board. Hey, we're in full rebuild mode. This is something we have to consider if the price is right. So they listened. The 49ers were a team that was in it. Their first-round pick is the number 2 overall pick. They weren't going to give that. Buffalo checked in. Their pick is number 9. They weren't willing to offer that. So this number 17 overall pick, this first-rounder Cleveland had, plus the Giants valued Jabril Peppers as a first-round pick. He was 2 years ago. They really like him. He's a Jersey kid. He's a little bit younger than Landon Collins and obviously cheaper, so they felt like they could replace him there. So they end up taking it seriously as of yesterday, right? Now, they like the Browns' offer. The Browns say, okay, shop it one last time, see what you can do, and then get back to us because we got to make some other decisions. Maybe they're in on Tyrell Williams as a free agent. So the Giants ultimately decided this was the right way to go. 2 first-round picks now, plus Peppers, plus a third-rounder. Plus, by the way, they undid the picks that they sent to the Browns last week in the Olivier Vernon, Kevin Zeitler trades, and now they're back in the 4th round. Cleveland's back in the 5th. So they felt like they got a good return. As one person there put it to me, we did a lot better than Pittsburgh did.
Yeah, no question about that. Pittsburgh, again, getting a 3 and a 5 for Antonio Brown, who was older. Let me ask you this, because when you say things like they weren't out there looking to shop him, but they were fielding calls. Well, I'm sure people are calling Kansas City about Patrick Mahomes, too, right? But they're not answering the phone. So if all these people are calling the Giants, they had to be sending out some signal that they were open for business, yes?
Louis Riddick put it well earlier in the show. If you don't want to trade him, you're not picking up the phone. So they're picking up. But again, the Giants believe they're in a tear-down mode. So you have a high-priced guy on your roster. Maybe the coaching staff has found him a little bit dicey to deal with here and there. Not that that was the driving force, but a factor, right? When you sit down and consider, should we do this? So, yeah, I think it was never absolutely not. We sat here yesterday, less than 24 hours ago.
Right.
Are they going to do this? And the answer was they're not trying to, but they're not ruling it out completely. That was the frame of mind the Giants took with this, and ultimately they believe that they're better off for having said yes to this, and we'll find out if they're right.
That's the part of it I understand what you're saying, but there is something in the parsing of the words of we're not ruling it out completely. Once you're not ruling, the Chiefs have ruled out trading Patrick Mahomes,
right?
That's you have a player like Odell Beckham. No, my point is, you have people I'm sure are calling people all the time. You're either in business to look to trade a guy or you're not, right? They were obviously willing to move on from Odell Beckham, and probably for a lot of reasons that make a lot of sense. Am I being told Ryan Clark is okay? Great. I got RC ready to go here. So I want to bring you in on 2 separate things. Since we're talking about Odell, let's start there. He's an LSU guy. You're an LSU guy. You've known him since he was a kid. What do you make of him being traded to Cleveland yesterday?
It's something that, to me, I didn't really think was a possibility until it was a possibility. I agree with you and Dan in the sense that if you're not saying no to a trade, you're saying that we're willing to get something done, and that's exactly what the Giants were doing. Listen, I think he's a generational talent. I think Odell Beckham Jr. is the most explosive wide receiver in the league. And, when you look at the Antonio Brown trade, you look at the Amari Cooper trade, and you look at what the Giants got back for him, it seems like the compensation that you take, but are you willing to get rid of a guy who could be a Hall of Famer? And I know there's some other things off the field that they may not like dealing with, but it's just difficult for me to trade away this type of talent, because even though you get a first-round pick, you get a later pick in the draft, and you get a Jabril Peppers, I still don't think you can be sure that replaces what Odell Beckham Jr. can do for you in between the lines.
Ryan, let me ask you this, because you also know Jarvis Landry there, obviously another LSU guy. They're the old teammates. What does this make Cleveland now? Here's a team that is a year removed from being 0-16. But you look at what they've put together there. What are the Browns right now?
Baker Mayfield's team, right? They're the Baker Browns. They drafted Baker Mayfield, and, they put some pieces around them. You have Chubb and Njoku. You have Jarvis Landry in the slot. And now you go out and get Odell Beckham Jr. Oh, by the way, Kareem Hunt is now a part of this roster. So this team is loading up on offense for their young quarterback. And we've seen so many teams be successful when they have great quarterbacks who are on their rookie contracts, which Baker Mayfield will be for the next 2 to 3 years. And so if you're a defensive coordinator in the AFC North or in the AFC in general, you have to be nervous when you're going to play this team. What are you going to do? Stag 9 in the box, play punt coverage on the outside on Odell Beckham Jr. and try to figure it out? You don't have enough people. So this team is going to be scary on offense, and it's a far departure from what they were 2 years ago under Hugh Jackson.
It's unbelievable. Again, they were 0-16 a season ago, and here they are legitimate Super Bowl contenders, at least on paper, in the AFC. Let me then segue you over to Le'Veon Bell. Obviously, you're a former Steeler, and you know the circumstances there well. I think you played 1 season with Bell, if memory serves correctly. What do you make of the way this whole thing plays out, winding up with him signing with the Jets overnight?
You know, it kind of feels like this was always a foregone conclusion. We had to wait a little longer than we thought for the Jets to be announced as the team, but he's been linked to them forever. I think once Anthony Barr backs out of his agreement with the Jets, they know they have the cap space to go out and get him. Then you look at it from the Le'Veon Bell point of view. He could have gotten 3 for $45 in Pittsburgh, right? So now you say, is missing out on $14 million in a whole season of football worth the deal you got? And I think he went with what he thought was the best deal. I believe he went with the most money. But sometimes when you get on the market, Greeny, you realize that what you thought of yourself, not everybody else thinks of the same things monetarily. But when you look at the Jets and what you've now done for your young quarterback, your quarterback who Greeny has now named 2 of his children after, you get him a piece that is very vital to him and his success, his progression, and also Adam Gase. Now you have something you can focus on offensively. You know where to start, you know where to end, and it's with Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah, tell us from a defensive player's perspective. We've had a lot of quarterbacks on here so far this morning, Orlovsky and McCann and others. From a defensive player's perspective, what does Le'Veon Bell do all week long? What do you have to be thinking about all week long as you get set to play against the Jets now?
Listen, I can be honest with you. The probably most simple yet most important decision or conversations Troy Polamalu and I had were when we played guys like Adrian Peterson, LaDainian Tomlinson. And that conversation would simply be in the meeting room, Troy, RC, how are we going to tackle him? Right? Because you got to figure out a way you're going to get these guys on the ground. You know you're going to be in space. And when there's somebody who physically puts that thought in your head, that's a difficult thing every week. And now you look at a schematic and strategic standpoint with all the ways you can line Le'Veon Bell up, start him out at the number 1 wide receiver, motion him back into the backfield. Now you know what the coverages are. When Sam Darnold gets in trouble late in downs, having Le'Veon Bell on the underneath routes and the options versus linebacker, which he wins 99% of the time. He's a matchup nightmare, and he's a guy who wins each and every matchup in different ways because he's so physically gifted. And so now you give Sam Darnold not only a security blanket, but you give the defensive coordinators who are facing the New York Jets a lot of problems in figuring out how to scheme Le'Veon Bell, and also on the other side try to confuse Sam Darnold and force him into young quarterback mistakes.
All right, well done. Thank you so much, RC. I appreciate the time very much and your perspective on these huge stories from around the National Football League. I'll take it back to the table, and that is an interesting way of looking at it from a defensive standpoint. And if you're Adam Gase, I mean, we know what that offensive – I know what the offense is, and you do too, that we've seen in Miami. But can you explain for the audience here who doesn't know that offense, Le'Veon Bell feels like a perfect piece for what Adam Gase likes to do.
Absolutely. And now Adam Gase gets to sit in there. I've said this on the show before. He gets to come in on a Monday and run his offense through Le'Veon Bell. Okay, what are the first down plays that we want to make sure that Le'Veon's going to be a part of? All right, we'll go to the run game. Inside zone or outside zone. Do we want to get him on the edge? Do we want to get him out in space and maybe throw him some screens? Make sure he's part of check down. So Adam Gase now has that guy that he can build his offense through. And then also on those third down and red zone situations, the broken plays again for Sam Darnold. Adam Gase is going to be able to sit there and go, you know what, on third downs, we got to have Le'Veon involved in here. In red zones, we want to have Le'Veon involved this way. And Sam, don't forget, he's going to be in Sam Darnold's ear all the time. You've got Le'Veon. Don't forget about Le'Veon. Le'Veon's going to be out there for you. Those are going to be huge for that offense.
And so